I believe my children are in danger, and I believe the enjoyment and freedoms we've all had are going to be eroded and taken, and the kids won't have them. And this is far bigger than me or my kids. This is about a generation of our kids. And I believe that. And I've believed it since growing up.
I agree with you.
So when this was starting...
What do you mean by freedoms, by the way?
I mean that the ability to speak, because they just curtail and suppress, and it suits the government as well. So they create the problem a lot of the time, which they're doing. And I think maybe I've played my part in that role where they want us all clashing with each other.
Is Islam, and in particular radical Islam, compatible with Western values at all? Take a look at this clip over here with Tommy Robinson being interviewed and having a discussion on the Trigonometry podcast. We'll watch this clip together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
What I'm really interested in, Tommy, and I think it's really important to have this conversation properly, right, is you talk about the fact that you're a very smart guy, I can tell. Very smart. We've sat across from some of the most intelligent people in the world. You're a smart guy, right? But you were not educated. You just had experiences when you were growing up. Is that fair to say, right?
That's fair to say.
So you know this, you've seen that, you've seen this happen to your cousin. All of these things are going on. You experience things. But then, and this is where I really want to hear your opinion, right? Is you started to actually study. You started to look at Islam. You read the Quran. You try to understand the scriptural part of all of this, right? And this is really where I think a lot of the conversation is now at, which is about Islam and the West, compatibility. Why is it that things are becoming more tense? Why is it that thing you talk about how when Muslims fight non-Muslims, even your Muslim friends will join them rather than you, right? So what is it that you've learned? And what is it that you believe about Islam? Can you explain that part to people?
Yeah, so 2010, it's a crime. 2010, I'm in jail. I'm doing 22 weeks of solitary confinement at that point. Yeah.
For what?
For illegally entering America.
Right,
Stupid move.
Yeah.
Do you know what it was? I'll tell you the truth. I sort of like lived my life where I think if you worry about consequence, you're never going to bring about change. And I wanted change. Yeah. So I felt at that time in 2000, I went to America 2009 or 10. I was detained at JFK and deported. And I thought, no, I've got an important message to give America. And so I went again on a friend's passport. I got in, I got in. And I gave a speech called A Warning to America. And what I've always said is, I wish someone come to my town 30 years ago and said, listen, this is what's going to happen unless you stop it. So I went to America, knowing what I was doing was wrong, knowing it was risky. I thought I'd end up in jail in America. But I didn't. I got detained here when I got back. And I spent 22 weeks in solitary confinement. Now, a Muslim outreach...
Mate, you know what? You're f***ing insane. You know that?
Yeah.
Like, from what I've seen of American prison, that is not a place you want to go to voluntarily.
No, but you know, crazily, I thought at the time, remember, we've been going to the English Defence League, I'm a deep thinker, yeah? I believe this country is in danger. And
I agree with you.
I believe my children are in danger. And I believe the enjoyment and freedoms we've all had are going to be eroded and taken, and the kids won't have them. And this is far bigger than me or my kids. This is about a generation of our kids. And I believe that. And I've believed it since growing up.
I agree with you.
So when this was starting...
What do you mean by freedoms, by the way?
I mean that the ability to speak, because they just curtail and suppress, and it suits the government as well. So they create the problem a lot of the time, which they're doing. And I think maybe I've played my part in that role where they want us all clashing with each other. Because as we're clashing with each other, we're not looking at them. And they want everyone separated into gay, straight, black, white, BLM, this group, that group. You're all warring with each other. And whilst you're warring with each other, they're implementing so many laws that you're not even listening about. And all those laws are going to curtail and prohibit your speech and your ability to even have discussions on any of these issues. And the reason being that most of the issues are coming from the government. It's their failure. It's all their problems. I don't blame Muslims for coming here. I don't blame Muslims in the UK for wanting Sharia law because this tells them to want it. So I don't blame them.
Well, let's come back to that, right? So you go to America, you because you thought you had an important message.
Yep.
I
spent 2 days in New York. If I knew I was going to do 22 weeks in solitary confinement, I'd spent a few months touring, wouldn't I? Yeah. I spent 2 days. I've got 22 weeks in solitary. Whilst I'm in there, I get sent a Quran by Muslims, and to try and convert me. So I take the Quran. I think, right, I've got a lot of time on my hands here. Let's have a look at this book. Right? Now, I don't know how many people know this, but the Quran is not in chronological order. I didn't know this. So one thing Muhammad says one day is next to something he says 20 years later. So for you to try and, any of us to try and make sense, it's like what the Christians used to do. They wanted everyone illiterate so they could control the population. The Quran is like an encrypted war manual that you can't make sense of. And it's important that you can make sense of it because abrogation in Islam means whatever Muhammad says later in his life supersedes what he says earlier. So if there's two contradictory verses, if he says love the Jews and then later he says kill the Jews, then which one did he say later? Yeah? This one matters. This prohibits this one. So they give me the Quran. And then I thought, right, let me make a few points here. Do not be friends with Christians or Jews. And I challenge anyone to do this. Pick up a Quran and go through and make reference to the verses that tell you not to be friends with Christians or Jews. And I started writing these verses and I had pages of them. And I was like, it was like a jigsaw just fell into place. Everything I've seen growing up, the Muslim playground, the Muslim dinner table, the friends who side with them, well, they're taught from a little age. Supremacy, they're taught not to be friends with us. They can't be friends with us. 70% of this book talks about us, how they need to treat us. So as I'm reading it, I started making sense of it. And that was and I didn't stop after that, if I'm honest. I didn't stop learning. And then when I got out of jail, I thought, right, many people watching this probably just think Jesus is like Muhammad. Muhammad is like Jesus. Two prophets, two alleged prophets. Right. They're nothing like each other, because I took the biography of Muhammad by Ibn Ishaq. So I like to go to the sources, the most recognized and renowned sources in the Islamic world. So again, not Tommy Robinson's opinion. This is not my story. This is the Islamic scholars of history, the best ones there are, of their life of Muhammad. So I started reading the life of Muhammad. And I read it. The Jewish tribe surrender. And this is why it's important, so people understand how important scripture is. Do you remember the Peshawar school attacks?
I don't know.
In Pakistan. So the Taliban, or Al-Qaeda, one of the two, they attacked a school and there was outrage about it. But what they did when they attacked schools, they pulled the pants down of all the kids. And anyone who started puberty was killed and beheaded. And anyone who hadn't was sacrificed as war booty. Yeah? Well, that's exactly what Muhammad did. This is why the scripture is important. So the Jewish tribe surrender. Now, when they surrender, Muhammad tortures Kanana. He's the leader of the Jewish tribe, setting fire to his stomach to rob his gold. What sort of prophet is this? Yeah? I'm thinking, what sort of man is this? Jesus says turn the other cheek. Muhammad's torturing and burning people and robbing them. Yeah. So he's robbing them, and then after robbing them, he takes that night, Sophia. So any Muslims, and when I have this conversation with Muslims, they don't even know about this. Half of them. Yeah. I said he took the man's wife that night and married her. Now here's the two different worldviews. I see that as raping the man's wife that night. Other Muslims have said, well, no, he saved her from a life of slavery, from all the other men raping her, because he took her. He was actually really good because he saved her. It's like, what? But anyway, he beheads these people, he does this, and I started going through his life, and he walks past another Muslim at another point, and this is all in scripture, and he says, have you derobed her? He's on about another slave. I said, no, give her here. So then I started understanding, and I started finding verses in here, there's 4, that say, outside of the 4 wives, what Muhammad tells you is you can take non-Muslim women as sexual slaves, yeah? And you're one of the verses says you're actually blameless. So I think, well, Rotherham, Telford, all these towns and cities, are they taking non-Muslim women as sexual slaves? Now, this is not confusing. Boko Haram's leader, when they took the girls in Nigeria, come out and said, Muhammad has commanded us to do this. Well, he has. Read the scripture. Yeah? Al-Qaeda, ISIS, what did they do to the Yazidi? This is not made up. There's not 30, 40 different terrorist groups all singing off the same hymn sheet. Yeah, this is a problem. And again, it's great that the majority of Muslims don't read this and take it literally. That's great. But the problem's coming from this. And I tried to have this conversation with Piers Morgan. We get onto him. I tried to have this conversation. So what I've done, so as I learned more, I then learned about Islam. I learned about Muhammad. I think we need to understand who Muhammad was. Yeah? If we've got 4 million British Muslims now who think Muhammad was perfect, and Muhammad married a 6-year-old girl and when she was 9, we're going to have a problem. If Muhammad beheaded and took sexual slaves, we're going to have a problem. If Muhammad taught all this, in the Quran, 7% of Mein Kampf is Jew hatred. 7%. 11% of that book. Mein Kampf is banned. This isn't banned. This is taught across the whole country. Now, you're not even allowed to have this conversation. And the Labour
you are.
Yeah.
We're having this conversation.
We're having it, but Labour government want to bring in Islamophobia laws that would prevent us even having this conversation.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you say you allowed it. We've come a long way.
You are now.
Yeah.
This is fair. Look, I this is why I wanted to ask you about this, Tommy, because I don't know exactly what I think about it. I just want to hear your opinion, because you've been talking about this for a very long time, and I think you have been, I was going to say demonized, and I think it's probably the correct term. You have been demonized for talking about it. But I also think, as the nature of what has been happening in this country is coming out, that I know, just speaking to lots of people, these are people who are not going to be on the streets in a riot. These are people who are sitting in TV studios and they're doing, comedy and they're doing journalism and they're doing politics and none of them will ever say anything publicly. But there are a lot of people now who are going, you know what, Tommy's been saying a lot of things that have been proven correct. So that's just where we're at. People can pretend that's not happening. That is what's happening, right? But what I'm trying to understand is what it is that you're saying, because one of the things that I don't understand, genuinely don't understand, is where we go from here, right? What is it that you think we ought to do? Because what you're saying, correct me if any of this is not your view, right? What you're really saying is Islamic doctrine is divisive and hateful towards non-Muslims, and it is about domination, right?
And it's incompatible with Western freedom and democracy.
And it's incompatible with Western freedom and democracy, which is where I think a lot of people's concern with that message is, for the simple reason of like, well, what do we do?
That's the point.
Is that a fair question?
If we accept this, if you accept we're right, what the hell are you going to do?
Right.
Because you've got 4 million Muslims here.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? And not just got 4 million Muslims, but you've got Saudi and Qatar own half the capital city. The money is embedded in the nation. Qatar has spent £750 million. Qatar that houses Hamas. Qatar have spent £750 million radicalising Muslims across Europe. They've messed up the whole of France. Yeah?
To be fair, Tommy, Qatar and Saudi are two very different states.
They are, because Saudi under the new king are actually coming quite progressive and actually trying to deal with some of these
and the UAE,
right? And the UAE.
So this is
the UAE.
This is another part of the discussion, which is really, I think, really important. And you keep saying that, and I think it's important to emphasize. I've come back from Uzbekistan a couple of months ago, and I grew up in Uzbekistan, Soviet Muslim country, right? They don't have a problem with this. They don't have grooming gangs. They don't have extremists. The extremists they have all leave because they make life intolerable for them, right? UAE, Saudi Arabia, a lot of Muslim countries are actually much better at dealing with Islamic extremism than we are, right?
Yeah, there's a reason for that as well. There's a reason for that. So UAE, Saudi, they ban all these extremist groups. Muslim Brotherhood, not allowed to operate. We actually give home to these groups because it supported British foreign policy. With the war in Afghanistan, with the Soviet, we wanted a Mujahideen.
Yeah.
We funded the Mujahideen.
The Americans did.
The Americans and us. Yeah. We gave home to their leaders in Europe. We allowed them to grow, foster, and all of a sudden, Boris Johnson, put it on here. Is this Boris Johnson? Remember this is Boris Johnson before 7/7. Yeah? Remember what it says in the Holy Quran. Slay the unbelievers wherever you can find them. We will perform jihad against the kuffar, the unbelievers. That was in Boris Johnson's book, 72 Virgins. So he knows what Islam is.
Right.
But then when he comes in power, he totally pretends he doesn't. He fully gets it. Yeah. And why did he do that? So there's many that understand it. Boris Johnson's one of them. Yeah. But he's a coward, and he took a different line. So when we say, what are we going to do? And most of these countries come down hard, but we didn't. We gave home. The Muslim Brotherhood have got offices in our capital cities. It's like they wouldn't be allowed to operate in the UAE or Saudi Arabia.
No.
Now, Saudi Arabia understand that you can't give any homage to Hezbollah, Hamas, these terrorist groups. And that, look at what's happened in Iran. But I think most people in our country need to understand how quickly a country can change. Look what happened to Iran under the Ayatollah. Look at the Islamic Revolution. They went from freedom-loving liberal,
women walking around miniskirts.
And I remember there's videos of them laughing in halls when they say women will have to wear a hijab. Yeah, well, now you get killed if you don't. Yeah? And that happened quick.
So what?
In order to have a society that's functional, you have to have a certain vibe, a certain worldview that everyone in that society will relate to, that like they can accept. Doesn't mean that everyone has to be exactly the same religiously, ethnically, or whatever, but that the society, in order to maintain itself, has to have a certain structure. I'm reminded, they were talking they gave multiple examples of Christianity and Islam, but when it comes to Judaism, so in ancient Israel, you didn't have to be of the Jewish faith to live in Israel. You just had to agree to adhered to a basic moral structure of living. So again, you didn't have to fulfill all the commandments, you didn't have to keep kosher, but if you wanted to live in the land of Israel, you had to not worship idols, not curse God, not murder, not commit adultery, not eat the limb of a live animal, not steal, and not and to adhere to the court system that was prevalent at the time. And so that was the structure. You didn't have to become Jewish. You didn't have to abandon all of your belief systems and conform to Judaism per se. You just had to agree to live into the basic moral structure that the society was created upon. And in fact, that's one of the reasons that Judaism doesn't proselytize. Look, in general, wherever we are, the goal is not that other people should become Jewish. It's just that you should live a basic moral life. What is called in the West natural law. If a person can live by natural law, then they are in the good graces of God and have established a civil society and ultimately can merit a place in the world to come. That's our belief as Jews. But in order to create any society and any cohesive group, we want to create a good business, you want to create a society, you want to create a family, there has to be something that represents the body structure of the group that we're talking about over here. If there are divergent, not only opinions and voices, but a divergent worldview of how it should function, and one that wants to usurp the current standard, the foundational worldview, then it's not going to work. And so for us as Americans living in an American society who are grounded in a Judeo-Christian, what I like to call Hebrew Bible values, so much so that our founding fathers viewed themselves as the new Israel leaving Egypt. They were leaving England, crossing a new Red Sea, the Atlantic Ocean, and winding up in a new promised land where they'd have the ability to serve God as they pleased. In fact, one of the original proposed seals of the United States was Moses parting the Red Sea and having the people walk through, because that's so undergirded the foundation of what America was built upon. These Hebrew Bible values in civil society, of liberty, of belief in God, and belief in the divine image of God that everybody possesses, is something that is inherent in our society. It's what Western values are shaped upon. And the more that we can get in touch with that history, and the more that we cherish what those values actually are, that's how we continue that our destiny be to the place that we want it to go. All sorts of ideologies, left and right, have over the years, over the centuries in the United States and throughout the Western world, have tried to make their mark and cause that the United States or the Western world sway from it, what undergirds it. And we need to stay strong in who we are. That doesn't mean that we don't let people in. It doesn't mean that we are judgmental or are putting off anyone from based on religion, color, creed, or anything like that. Everyone should be welcomed. The caveat, though, is that you have to agree to live on a societal level. You have to agree to conform yourself to the basic principles that shape Western society. If you can do that, then we dwell together in great joy and happiness, the way that it should be. If you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.